What's up, guys, and welcome to a special Christmas edition of Player Pool. Going to be breaking down the Christmas slate for DraftKings lineups and building some lineups too. And there are two games in this should be pretty interesting. One of them looks like it should be a higher scoring game in Baltimore and Houston, but I think that with the way these defenses are playing lately, especially on the Baltimore side, it might be better to target the Kansas City Pittsburgh game. But I'll get into that right after this. What's up, guys? Simon Edwards at PumaCom here with Heat Seeker Sports, and you're watching Player Pool. Going to be breaking down the Christmas slate, as I mentioned in the top of the show. We're looking at two games here. We got the Baltimore Ravens versus the Houston Texans, and we got Baltimore as 5.5-point favorites in that one. Houston, of course, just lost Tank Dell. They're losing their receiver weapons left and right, and they're just in rough shape from a offensive standpoint, but the defense has been playing pretty good. And the Ravens obviously have been, playing a little bit better on defense than they were in the beginning of the season. They're less of a target now for wide receivers, but still a little bit vulnerable there. And the other game I'm looking at is going to be the Kansas City Chiefs versus the Pittsburgh Steelers. Kansas City are 2.5-point favorites in that one. They're playing in Pittsburgh. Playing in Pittsburgh at this time of year is usually pretty dangerous, and Pittsburgh getting George Pickens back likely. Kansas City's not going to have an easy match against Pittsburgh this week. So don't be surprised if Pittsburgh's able to pull off an upset at home against Kansas City, a team that has basically been supposed to have lost a few games recently, but they keep getting lucky at the end of these games and pulling them out. But maybe Pittsburgh is able to put up a fight and actually close this one out. So we'll take a look at both those games. Make sure to hit the like button, give me the 30 likes so we can put my favorite picks in the comment section before the games start. And make sure to subscribe to the channel. I'm going to be doing a lot of Christmas content as well as content for the rest of the week. We got a whole bunch of football this week. So you're going to want to subscribe to the channel so you know when those shows come out. Help me get to 1,500. I'm trying to get to 1,500 subscribers by the end of the week, or by the end of week 17, I should say. So help me out there. And you want to subscribe anyways to get alerts for when these shows go up, because I do a lot of them and I don't really have a set schedule. So it's just kind of whenever I get a chance to record them, I'll put them up. So for instance, I'm recording this one at 11:20 my time, and I'll probably post it shortly after I record it. So hit the subscribe button there, and let's dig into this player pool. All right, so we got these two games. I'm going to do the usual drill. Had a lot of success recently with a lot of my picks. If you watched this past week, I believe it was Pittsburgh-Baltimore game, almost shipped that one. I built the winning lineup on the show. I left it with one spot empty, and I said to either use Calvin Austin or use the Baltimore defense. I only put one lineup in the damn contest, and I used Calvin Austin. If I'd have put my second one in there with the Baltimore defense, I would have won, probably about $6K or so. And that was the main DraftKings tournament for that particular slate. There was a big chop, but it would have been a good hit anyways. I had Isaiah Likely in the captain. He was the lineup I built on the show and did really well. And then this past showdown slate, can't remember what the game was. Oh, it was Tampa Bay, and I had McMillan in the captain, and McMillan caught a touchdown. He almost caught two touchdowns in that game, and so that game almost was a huge game as well, and just barely missed on that one. And then there was another one. There was another one where a backup running back for God, I can't even remember. It was whatever the game was on Monday, which was yesterday, which shows how fried my brain is from doing all these shows. But I had the backup running back, and he ended up scoring a touchdown. And I wasn't getting away from the main running back in the captain spot, Josh Jacobs, but I had his backup running back in there as well to get us a little bit different. He ended up being about 5% owned, scored a touchdown, and then of course, like they started giving the ball to Wilson. I had Brooks, and they started giving the ball to Wilson at the end of the game, and then Wilson ended up scoring a touchdown. So it could have potentially been a 2-touchdown game for Brooks, which would have been a huge freaking day. And at that in that game, towards the end of it, the last 2 minutes, I was in first in that contest. I only had like 4 lineups in that one, and of course, at the end of the game, Wilson scored that touchdown and ended up costing me, I think, $25K. And that was actually in the flea flicker. I didn't have it in the main contest in that one, but I was in first place at some point with about 2 minutes left. And, it just goes to show, like, you can still hand build lineups and put in very few lineups still and actually do well if you think through these games and you think through these scenarios hard enough. Like, you can't really when you're building with like optimizers and sims and everything, like, all it takes is a really good strategy with these showdown slates, which makes it huge potential to capitalize on it if you can think through the games and look at some of the injuries and stuff like that to the defense, project where the offenses are going to attack, and then there's only so many combos that are actually going to be viable that you can build, like through sims and like optimizers and everything. I use optimizers. I haven't gotten into sims yet, but I do use optimizers, like when I'm building more than, like 5-10 lineups. But for the most part, I'm building these by hand, and a lot of my process you'll see on this show. So almost had a huge win a few weeks back too with the Kansas City game against Tampa Bay. I was up winning 118K up until the very last play of overtime. I had it from the end of the third quarter up until the very last play of overtime when Kareem Hunt scored a touchdown, and it cost me 118K. But gives you an idea of how close it's been this season with hitting a big one, and have hit on a few slates so far, but just have not hit that big winner yet. So hopefully we can get it on Christmas and pay for all these damn presents. So let's get into the injury look here. We'll take a look at Kansas City's depth chart first. DJ Humphries, the left tackle, is out. Jawan Taylor, the right tackle, is questionable, so we might have some shakiness on that offensive line. Patrick Mahomes allegedly had a high ankle sprain a few weeks ago, but really didn't affect him last week. He ran more yards than he's run all season, and he did stuff like that last year too, where they said he had a high ankle sprain, and he ended up running a bunch of yards the very next game. So I don't really buy into it when they say Patrick Mahomes is injured. You see a bunch of the receivers on IR, but they do have their studs all healthy. Worthy is healthy. Hopkins is healthy. Hollywood is healthy. And they're going to be working Hollywood in as we head into the playoffs. They want him to get acclimated to the offense. Last week, he had limited snaps, but all those snaps led to pretty much opportunity. So, they're putting him in when they're going to use him, basically, if you believe last week will carry on into this week. As far as the defense, Chris Jones is banged up. He's questionable. I think he's probably going to play, but, you never know. So keep an eye on that news, because that's going to be huge for Russell Wilson. Conkrane is out. He's a linebacker. Jalen Watson on IR. He was one of their good corners, the right cornerback. And when they lost him, their defense went from pretty much lights out to vulnerable. And now they're down the nickelback, Chamari Connor, on top of that. So Chamari Connor is out for this one, and that is going to be good news for the Pittsburgh slot receiver this week, and that is Calvin Austin. Let's take a look at who Kansas City's opponent is. The Pittsburgh Steelers. We take a look at the injury report here. We're missing, looks like Justin Fields is questionable. He was out last week. Skowronek is out. That's even more good news for Calvin Johnson. Skowronek was getting a whole bunch of targets last week, at least early in the game. On the right tackle, they're missing Troy Fautanu. I'm not really sure where he's at in the depth chart. And they're missing, they got some depth chart issues at the left tackle and the center position. And, looks like they might be far down the depth chart. I'm not too familiar with the offensive line there. As far as the defense, got a few guys on IR. Looking at Joey Porter being out is the most significant one. Porter being out, he's the right cornerback, so that's going to be good news for the receiver who lines up on the left side of the field the most, and I'll take a look at that right now too. That is DeAndre Hopkins. So DeAndre Hopkins has a decent matchup, and I had DeAndre Hopkins in my my underdog pick'em this week, so you're going to want to check that out. Use the promo code SEEK if you haven't signed up for Underdog already. That's going to get you a 50% deposit match up to $1,000, and it'll get you a free pick too. The free pick this week is Patrick Mahomes higher than 0.5 total yards. All right, so let's get into this next team here. Let's see. We are looking at the Baltimore Ravens. Baltimore Ravens will be the next team up. We got Nelson Aguilar is out again. Last week, that made me like Isaiah Likely because Isaiah Likely runs some of his routes in the slot. That is going to be significant because I believe the nickelback for the Texans is out this week, or at least he's questionable. Last week, I liked Likely because the safety was out for Pittsburgh. He's back this week, though, so we don't get that advantage with the Kansas City tight ends. Justice Hill also out. He had a concussion last week. That's going to be significant for some of these other guys. Keaton Mitchell was a fast riser last season, and he tore his ACL, I believe, and he just came back a few weeks ago. But Keaton Mitchell, we could see him get another opportunity to make a inroad on this offense and getting a role in this offense. Rasheen Ali has been used a little bit. We'll take a look at him when we get to the player pool. Charlie Kolar is out on the tight ends. Like it's one less tight end competition for these guys. If you look over at the defense, Arthur Mollett is out at nickelback. He's the backup to Marlon Humphrey anyways. Tre'Davious White is questionable. Got a few guys on IR. Amore Davis is out. So, we got some depth issues mainly. Zay Flowers is questionable. Not sure what his status is. I haven't heard anything about him being on the outside of questionable, so we'll take a look at that. But relatively healthy for Baltimore. Let's move on to the Houston Texans. Houston Texans, we are looking at a few of these offensive linemen are out. Shaq Mason out. Juice Scruggs is out. Obviously, we got Tank Dell just tore his ACL last week. We got Stephon Diggs on IR. Case Keenum, backup quarterback. Got a bunch of other guys that are on IR or out. On top of that, we got Azeez Al-Shaair is on suspension, and they're also missing Folorunsu Fatukasi. Jalen Petrie is the significant one here. That's going to be good for the tight ends. And Jimmy Ward is also on IR. So a couple of these important safeties are going to be out against Baltimore. So Baltimore gets another situation where Likely and Andrews will be interesting. Both those dudes scored touchdowns last week. And we got, just a few other guys on IR here in the secondary. So that's significant for our tight end situation in Baltimore. All right, so let's go back over to the player pool here. Lamar Jackson, probably going to be the highest owned guy on the slate. Good reason for that. Facing off in a should be a decent offensive battle. Like the Baltimore Ravens are giving up 19.8 DraftKings points a game to the quarterback position. They've been better against receivers recently. I think they did some shuffling or like one of the guys came off injured reserve or whatever, but they've been allowing 21 DraftKings points a game to the wideouts, which has been a middling matchup, and 10.4 to the slot, which is a bottom 10 matchup for Houston. So Houston does not have any good matchups on the secondary, and they're already thin in their secondary on top of it. They just signed Deontay Johnson, and this would make a great revenge game, but he is out. He's already been ruled out, so we're not going to get Deontay in this one. Let me just confirm that. I don't see him out here, but I saw him out, I believe, in the DraftKings. Let's take a look. Let's double check that. Yeah, Deontay Johnson is out according to DraftKings. Keep an eye on that. Maybe he doesn't get ruled out afterwards. But yeah, keep an eye on Deontay, because this would be the ultimate revenge game. Houston is desperate for receiving weapons. I'm surprised they're not putting them in this one. But yeah, Houston is desperate for a receiver. Losing Tank Dell, all they got is Nico Collins and some guys who haven't really done too much this season. But we could see some usage out of guys like Mechie. I would imagine Mechie, he's back this week. He's going to take back over that slot role against Baltimore. Mechie, of course, on the showdown slate, recommended him on this show. He ended up having 18.4 DraftKings points a game against Detroit. We targeted him against Detroit because Detroit was weak against the tight end. Let's take a look at what slot receivers are getting from percentage. All right, so as far as Baltimore, I'm going to look at a tool here from Fantasy Points. It tells me what percentage of targets slot receivers are getting against Baltimore. It's pretty low, 29.6%. That is bottom 6. So not a good matchup for Mechie this week. Let's see. It looks like Nico Collins, probably just going to have the best matchup on top of probably being the highest or maybe second highest owned guy on the slate behind Jackson. The way that the Texans have been struggling on offense, and the way that Stroud in particular has been struggling, Nico Collins might make an interesting fade candidate depending on how these lineups are building. So keep that in mind with Nico Collins being the probably the highest owned guy on the slate. All right, let's take a look here at some of these other guys. George Pickens is coming back. He's coming back from a hamstring injury, though, so we don't know if they're going to ease him back in or if they're going to give him his regular workload. Let's see what they say here. Supposedly, he does not have an injury designation. He's 150 yards away from reaching 1,000 yards. So, yeah, I mean, it's just Pickens is going to be more of a gamble, but maybe that reduces his ownership. I'm seeing him at 45%, so he's like the third highest wide receiver being owned this week. So maybe not so much impact, but if he's the third highest and you're looking for a fade candidate, George Pickens would make an interesting fade candidate on the prospect of being eased back in coming off that injury. Now, Kansas City against wide receivers, they are allowing 18.5 to wideouts, and that's a middling matchup, at least in the last 4 weeks. They're allowing 18.9 to slot receivers, which is where Calvin Austin gets a little bit interesting here. Calvin Austin, told you about the Chiefs allowing targets to the slot. According to Fantasy Points, the Chiefs are allowing the most targets to the slot receiver, allowing 39.9% of their targets are going to slot receivers against Kansas City. So that is significant for Calvin Austin. He's been getting a lot more usage recently, a couple weeks in a row with 5 targets. Of course, Pickens was out during those weeks, but he's had some weeks in there too against Cleveland where he had 78 yards, and against the Chargers earlier in the season he had 95 yards. So he's certainly capable of popping off and paying off that 4,200 salary. So Calvin Austin to me is pretty interesting. I incorporated him into that underdog short I told you guys about earlier. So make sure to check that out over on YouTube and TikTok. Zay Flowers listed as questionable with his shoulder. So it's his shoulder that's hurt. Flowers, let's see. Flowers mainly running in the slot. And that matchup against Houston has given up 15 DraftKings points a game to slot receivers. So that's significant. Like Flowers runs 38% of his routes out of the slot, 37 from the right side of the field, and 27 from the left side of the field. So let's see. Let me check something else out with Flowers here. Flowers, yeah, they got him listed as a slot receiver still. So yeah, Flowers, slot receiver, has the better matchup against Houston. I don't think Stingley follows people into the slot, so that'll be good for Flowers. It'll keep him away from Stingley. Stingley likely to be more on Bateman, I would guess. Rashad Bateman, that would be a bad matchup for Bateman. Let me check and see how that plays out here. Get an idea of where Stingley lines up real quick. Stingley is primarily the left side of the field, so he'll be facing off against the right, the guy who lines up on the right the most. And yeah, that's going to be probably Rashad Bateman. He's 52% on the left, 40% on the right. So likely to have the Stingley coverage, as I don't believe Stingley travels much into the slot, if at all. So keep that in mind. Let's see who else we got here. We got Worthy. Worthy against the Steelers. Worthy is primarily a slot receiver. So that is going to be a situation not very good for Worthy. Pittsburgh's only giving up 8.2 DraftKings points a game to the slot receivers. So not a very good matchup for Worthy in the slot, but he does run 33% from the left side of the field and 30% from the right side of the field. So you'll have the easier matchups too, but Hopkins is going to be the one primarily facing whoever the backup to Joey Porter is. But these guys don't get a ton of snap shares. Let's go over to look at the snap shares here. Looking at wide receivers. Scroll down to Kansas City here. Smith-Schuster had 38%, 42% for Justin Watson, 61% for Worthy. That's the most out of those guys. And then if we scroll down to multi here, we see Hopkins had 34%, only 34% snap share. So, they're either trying to preserve him for the playoffs, or Hopkins is, like he's still hurt. He was hurt in the beginning of the season, so he might still have an injury going on there. All right, guys. So let's move on to let's see. Calvin Austin, I mentioned I like. Hollywood Brown came back last week. He had eight targets. So that's pretty huge. 8 targets in his first week with the Chiefs. Hollywood Brown, they were going to build their entire offense around Hollywood Brown. He got hurt in the preseason, never got his opportunity to play, and he comes back last week and he gets 9.5 DraftKings points off 8 targets. So Hollywood was not injured to his leg. It was his shoulder injury that took him out, but he's back. They're going to want to ramp him up heading into the playoffs. DeAndre Hopkins really didn't get 34% snap shares. Not a lot for DeAndre Hopkins. So maybe Brown is going to be worked in a little bit more. He's got the matchup against Pittsburgh. Let's see where they have him lining up. Marquise Brown, I see him listed as a running from the right side of the field. So that's where's Porter at? Get an idea exactly where Porter lines up. Porter lines up on the right side of the field. So with him out, that's going to benefit the receiver who lines up on the left side of the field the most. And Marquise Brown is only on the left side of the field for 27% of his snaps. He's in the slot for 40% of his snaps. Already talked about how that's not necessarily a good matchup. So, really, DeAndre Hopkins running 33% of his routes from the right side of the field. And let's see, DeAndre Hopkins running 40% of his routes from the left side of the field is going to have that matchup against Porter's backup. Probably more than these other guys. So just something to keep in mind when we're trying to figure out which one of these receivers to target. But keep in mind too that Hopkins has a very low snap count these past few weeks, so going to be a kind of a tough call there. Worthy, maybe they put Worthy in favorable matchups in this one, and hope that his speed will beat the cornerbacks here. Mechie I talked about, likely to take that slot role, but that's not really a great matchup against Baltimore, at least recently. But other cheap guys, I don't really see too many other cheap guys that are interesting. Could be wrong here. I think maybe it's a strategy this week where let's take a look at these matchups here. So none of the running backs in this slate have good matchups. None of them do. Like the Chiefs are giving up 20.8 DraftKings points. Pittsburgh's giving up 14.8 DraftKings points. Or sorry, Kansas City's giving up 14.8 DraftKings points. Pittsburgh's giving up 20.8. Baltimore is giving up 20.4 DraftKings points, and Houston is giving up 18.7 DraftKings points to running backs. Those are all among the worst matchups in the league for running backs. So we also have some stud running backs on this slate. We got Derrick Henry, we got Joe Mixon, we got Pacheco, and then we got Harrison Warren. So these are all running backs that get targeted at a high clip, and they're all in bad matchups this week, which is going to make the strategy interesting because this is the type of week where maybe if we can see a weakness against receiving for these defenses, that we can actually target some of these backup satellite running backs here. Let me take a look and see DVOA against pass catching backs. Wide receiver 1, 3, tight end, DVOA versus wide receiver. All right, so looks like all these guys are pretty good against pass catching backs too. Kansas City is among the best against pass catching backs, so that's not good for Jaylen Warren as a potential satellite back that we could target. Houston is right there with them, so that's not good for the Kansas City. For the Baltimore pass catching backs. So Keaton, the guy I just talked about, that's not a good matchup for him. If we go to Pittsburgh, Pittsburgh's not much better of a matchup. So the Kansas City running backs, they don't have that relief like catching out of the backfield. Baltimore is the worst against defending passes out of the backfield of these options, but that's only a middling matchup. They're probably right in the middle of the NFL as far as defending pass catching backs. So Mixon might be the most the best guy in that situation because he's basically taking on like a workhorse role where he's receiving back and he's the obviously the rushing the main rusher. So Mixon could be interesting in this, but Houston, I don't know that they have much to play for. So maybe to decide to rest Mixon a bit this week, keep him healthy heading into the playoffs with their situation that they currently have. So I wouldn't imagine that Mixon's going to get a ton of usage. Like he's not going to be running 30 times in this game. I wouldn't think. Uh, so Mixon, it's going to be a tough one to decide which of these backs are going to be the best back to play. But that's going to give us opportunity to spend down at running back this week and maybe focus on some of these receivers and tight ends, because those safeties are missing for Houston this week. So that could make the Baltimore tight ends interesting. Pittsburgh has a good matchup, obviously, against Kansas City. Kansas City giving up 15.5 DraftKings points a game to the tight end position. And then on top of that, Baltimore is giving up 13 DraftKings points a game to the tight end position. So we got tight ends are in really good spots this week, and we got running backs in really bad spots this week. So keep that in mind with your flex positions. We got a couple teams that are really bad against slot receivers. Kansas City, obviously, talked about them. Houston, also bad against slot receivers. And last week, that was the reason, part of the reason why I targeted Likely, because they had a weak slot matchup on top of, like a team missing their safety. So they were going to be vulnerable to a receiver like Likely, who runs out of the slot and he's a tight end. So let's go ahead and start building this lineup with some of that information that we have here. First, let's go through tight ends. Kelsey mentioned his matchup against Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh giving up 12.9 DraftKings points a game to the tight end position. Kelsey last week got 7 targets. He's been getting targets. He hasn't done anything with them. He might just be dust at this point, but maybe he comes alive in the playoffs like last year. Mark Andrews, probably one of the better matchups on the slate. Same with Likely. Both those dudes scored touchdowns last week. Schultz has a good matchup. Freiermuth has a good matchup. All these guys have, pretty good matchups here. So these tight ends are going to be all in play in this one. So let's go ahead and start building a lineup. The main way people are going to start are obviously going to be with Jackson. Let's take a drink here. All right, so Jackson, we can start with him. Let's put him with Flowers with that matchup that we see for slot receivers against them. And I talked about the tight end position. So let's give it Likely on this one to run it back from last week. Likely, take some routes in the slot, and then they also have those issues at safety. So that's a double stack with Lamar. Let's go back on the other side. Let's run it back with Collins. Don't want him in the flex. And it's going to be 4,700 per guy. We don't have any running backs left or yet. Let's go to defense. Let's go with the Steelers D. And let's put Mixon in there. And let's look at another option here. Like I said, we don't necessarily need to. Warren is more expensive than Harris. That's interesting. He's been getting more of a workload recently. Now, Keaton Mitchell or Ali could be the key here. Using one of these guys. Let's figure out their their usage. Let's go back over to snap counts. All right, so looking for Baltimore here. Baltimore, we see Derrick Henry, 46%, Ricard, 17%, Hill, only 7% last week. He got hurt in that one. Who stepped up, though? Rasheen Ali had 9%. Mitchell, not used at all. Ali might be the guy. Although they're gonna, I feel like they're gonna get Mitchell involved here at some point. He was inactive last week, so he's been a healthy scratch for 3 consecutive games. We're gonna want to look at the beat reporters and see what they're saying about this situation, because maybe Mitchell hasn't fully recovered from his ACL tear, but that's gonna make Ali the interesting guy here at 4,300. Has not got any work in the receiving game yet. Not sure if he is if he's gonna be, the pass catching back here, but that's gonna be an important piece of information. We're gonna want to look at Mitchell and Ali and see which one of these guys is gonna be the pass catching back. Let's go with Ali here, though. That gives me some salary relief at 4,300. Like I said, I'm not too worried about not having one of these other receivers in the game. Running backs in the game, just because they all have bad matchups. Now, let's go to the rest of these guys and get some salary relief here with Calvin Austin. I already mentioned how I liked him. That's going to give me 4,800 left in the flex. We can come down here. Bateman. Listing option. Let's see what Brown's ownership is. That could help us differentiate a little bit more. Brown is looking at about 18, 19% ownership. Like I said, like he had 8 targets last week. So he's interesting. If we wanted to go double tight end, I don't know if I'd go double Baltimore tight end, just because I got Flowers in there already. But, that being said, last week, Jackson, Henry, Flowers, Likely, and Andrews all hit, because Likely and Andrews both hit home run. Both hit touchdowns. Flowers had a long catch at the end of the game, and then all the other stuff happened. So let's we'll keep Andrews in mind here. Brown is my favorite option, though. Schultz is an option. So, you got options. I don't mind this direction at all. I think that this is actually a pretty decent direction. I don't have any Kansas City guys in my lineup. So, yeah, Hollywood would probably be the best option there. He's got low ownership. We're already different with putting Ali in here instead of one of these other stud running backs. But, like I said, like, they all got bad matchups, and they're all, Harris is pretty cheap and Warren are pretty cheap. Actually, they're like, most of them are pretty cheap. So it doesn't really gain us too much going Ali. But, like in a Jackson lineup where we're scrounging for money, getting an extra, what is it, like 1,400 or almost $1,000 is going to be helpful. So let's move on to a different lineup. I kind of like Russ Wilson against Kansas City this week. Now that he has Pickens back, he's the cheapest quarterback. He's got Pickens. We know that they're going to, probably want to be aggressive in this one. Not sure what the weather situation is in Pittsburgh tomorrow, if it's going to be any sort of a snow situation. Let's see. It looks like it's just going to be cold. I don't see any signs of snow, so should be okay in Pittsburgh tomorrow. So let's get Russ in there. Let's assume that Pickens is feeling good. Let's get Pickens in there. Let's get Austin in there too. Already talked about him a few times. Could also go Freiermuth. But let's go with Austin for now. Let's put Henry in there. Actually, let's get Mixon in there, because I think he's just going to have a bigger role in the passing game. Defenses, I don't mind Texans or Ravens. Let's go with Ravens since they're not that much more expensive. Now, you know what? Let's go for the Texans. No, they got too many injuries. Let's go with the Ravens. So Russ to Pickens and Austin. We got to decide who we want to run it back with. Pittsburgh's weakness. DeAndre Hopkins was going to be in the best on paper matchup, but we don't know how much usage he's going to get. So we could pivot to Worthy. Let's put Worthy in there. And then we can try and fill the rest of this out. Let's go with Likely again, just for consistency. Going to give a 68.50 left over. I don't like either of these Pittsburgh running backs. That's part of the reason why I like Russell Wilson. I think they're going to have to throw the ball more. Pacheco, if we think that they're going to play, let's put Henry in here, see where it gets us. Leaves us with 5,500. I do think that we're a little different with some of our other picks in this one. But let's look at the flex here. We put Jalen Warren or Harris in there. Already talked about how I don't like either of them. You could get Hopkins in there, Hollywood. And then some of these other options, like we could go double tight end, and this one would make more sense to go double tight end because we don't have any other receivers for Baltimore in there. You know what? Let's take Henry out. Let's put Flowers in. I like Flowers better. That's going to leave us with 7,300 for our second running back position. I mean, we could put Pacheco in there. That would make sense with the way that we've got this built. Pacheco has not been getting a lot of work, is the only problem. Let's go Andrews here just to be safer. You could go Andrews or Likely, and just leave money on the table if you used a lineup like this. So it gives us a good Russ Wilson build. I kind of like that build. If we wanted to swap out Austin and put in Freiermuth, leaves us with 5,400 for our last receiver spot. And same deal. You can go like Hopkins, Brown. You could even put in Austin if you really want to, and triple stack Russ. But I probably wouldn't go in that direction. But you see the options it leaves you. do one more. We'll do it Mahomes lineup. Also, I didn't have Nico in that lineup, so that, you know, could bite me in the ass. So let's go with Mahomes in this one. Let's put him with Hopkins, even though Hopkins gets those low counts. And let's give him Kelsey in this one, just with the matchup being, like middling. You know what? Let's not do Kelsey. Let's put Freiermuth as a run back in this one. For this one, let's assume that, well, if Patrick Mahomes is throwing the ball, we likely need Pickens to be doing something. So let's get Pickens in here. And let's put Collins in here too. Doesn't leave us much for the running back position, but let's at least get Mixon in there. Let's look at the defense here. I'm going to put in, going to go with the Steelers in this one too. Leaves us with 45.50 per guy. Only got one receiver here with Mahomes, so I want to get a second receiver with him. And that is probably going to need to be Brown because he's pretty cheap. Leaves me with 4,600 for my second running back, and that puts us in that Keaton and Ali range. So you see how that's going to be beneficial if you can figure out which one of those Baltimore guys is going to be the receiving back this week, taking over for Justice Hill, who has a concussion. But it's giving you a few options, just thinking through the slate. It's late at night. I don't have complete grasp of the slate, but just talking through it and looking at all the injuries and like building lineups, getting an idea of the salary and stuff. That's ultimately what you will help set in the right direction with building these things. So keep that in mind when you're watching these shows. A lot of times, people are looking at the slate in depth for the first time, or just kind of like talking their ways through it. That's why it's important to see any follow up on some of these shows to see what people are thinking after having a few more days to think about the slate. Obviously, this is Christmas Eve already. So my opinion on this slate probably won't change too much, but at least I'll have a firmer grasp of, guys that I like that Baltimore running back situation is going to be interesting. It could be a situation where, you take a lineup like this and you do one version with Keaton Mitchell, and then you add another version with Ali and put them in the same contest. You're going to want to look at the beat reporters if you're doing single entry, or if you're doing a very like slim amount of lineups like I normally do, honestly. So that's going to be a huge thing for me to look into, checking out between Keaton Mitchell and Ali, which one of these guys is going to be taking on that Justice Hill role with the bad running back matchup that they have against Houston. Let's see. Just want to check one more thing here. Yeah, Houston pretty tough against the pass catching backs regardless. But if we're looking for a to fill that last spot with a cheap guy, then I think the Baltimore guys make a lot of sense. What did Pierce do last week? He's not getting any targets. Who is it? Daria Ogunbowale. I think maybe he's the guy that gets the targets. I mean, Dare might be interesting at 4K. Let's look at the snap count that he got last week. Dare had a 16% snap count. Only, like about half of what Mixon had. And then nobody really else had that much. So Dare might be the dude that's gonna, get at least some work, but he hasn't shown too much upside except for when Mixon was out. That's why I kind of like leaning towards those Baltimore pass catching backs instead. But so it's just something to think through. Make sure you're looking at that when you're doing your research, and hopefully that helps put people in a good direction for building their lineups. Make sure to hit the like button. Give me the 30 likes and put out my thoughts in the comment section later on. And make sure to subscribe to the channel. Get me to 1,500. I need about 100 left to get there. And just been on a roll with these picks recently. It comes in spurts when like when like you're just feeling good about the slates and you're feeling good about the matchups and stuff like that, and your thoughts are coming to fruition, and that's what it's been like the past couple weeks for me. I also had I entered the $55 contest on FanDuel and came in third place in that one. I believe last week too. So it's been pretty good recently. So hopefully you can keep the momentum going with this slate and get everybody a good Christmas present here. All right, guys, good luck and hit that like button. And sign up for Underdog. Use the promo code SEEK for a 50% deposit match up to $1,000.